I would like now to invite our undergraduate speaker to the podium, Charles Goldhaber. He was the recipient of the 2010 Newport Prize with the paper An Account of Practical Wisdom Needs an Account of Intuitive Intelligence. He's planning to apply to PhD programs in philosophy this fall. Charles, please.
Human beings have found ourselves with the peculiar burden that we can understand ourselves and the world within which we dwell. In our going about, we cap glimpses of who we are, and we take interest in our ability to live in specific ways, to take a stand on the world such that we embody something meaningful, to act deliberately, intentionally, to bring a continuity to our lives. In this ability grows a natural curiosity. We find that we must concern ourselves with something, and that we are free to choose what. So we wonder what that something should be. What is it out there for me to do? When I speak of our ability to understand as a burden, I say this because the natural curiosities that grow within it can press themselves upon us. The question, what should I do, finds no simple answer. And as the source of an unanswered question, our ability to understand ourselves can receive a character of uncanny urgency. Philosophy, I think, is that resolute posture in which we choose to not flee from the fact that these curiosities press upon us. Philosophy stands firm. It says that it is no mistake that we find ourselves in these questions. Rather, it is constitutive of the sort of beings we are to have these questions, to search for answers, and eventually to find that ground upon which we already stand. There are a few points here that I'd like to bring up. First is the idea that philosophy is natural. I think that Aristotle was right when he to say that all men desire by nature to know. We would not be who we are if we did not feel a deep and primal drive to ask the hard questions. As Immanuel Kant says, these questions are prescribed by the very nature of human reason itself. It is our peculiar fate that we cannot ignore them. Since we feel the force of these questions, it is natural to try to answer them. In this sense, philosophy is not an isolated obscurity or an idiosyncratic hobby. We do not just recline in armchairs and ruminate about the ways of the universe as an amusement. Philosophy is an activity that has its foundation in our being, the sort of being that gives rise to its own understanding and action. It is part of our natural history as human beings. But the questions are hard. We do not even know whether we can give definitive answers to them. Someone asks, what is good in life? And others give some intuitive suggestions. Pleasure, friendship, study, virtue, whatever seems right to you. How do we navigate through the responses so as to select the best? How do we know that any of those is the right one? We might have to repress our gut reactions if we're to select fairly. Or perhaps gut reactions are the only relevant considerations to begin with. The questions are hard, so hard that we do not always see how to even approach them. It is for this reason, I think, that many give up on trying to answer them. We don't have to make progress on them in order to live our lives. But ignoring the questions cannot deprive them of their primordial force. One still has to live a life, and one will still want to know the best, or how best to do so. For me, this brings out another characterization of philosophy. That is, philosophy is brave. In philosophy, one acknowledges the fact that humankind can never really turn its back on these questions. And so the philosopher takes on the hard questions, knowing full well how hard they can be. But the philosophical stance is hopeful and resolute. It says, we may uncover a way to the answers. The way might be steep and unsure. Sensitivity, creativity, and foresight will have to pierce through a darkness of obscurity. Philosophical inquiry must stand firm through a chaos of a constant battle between us and our words, concepts, and intuitions. And after even the most triumphant struggle, it is possible that we will find ourselves no closer to the answer than before we began. But we will push onwards and bravely, treating the hard questions as a heritage and a responsibility. The questions are hard, and not just any approach to them will work. What's more, attacking the questions without constant, careful consideration at each step can cause more harm than good, perhaps by covering up routes to more promising and genuine answers. In this respect, philosophy is largely a method of tearing down dogma. This brings me to a third characterization of philosophy. That is, philosophy is honest. We can see this also in the fact that part of philosophy's canon is to evaluate the importance of the questions it tries to answer. That is, to evaluate itself. I think the honesty that one must achieve to engage in philosophy is one of philosophy's most overlooked merits. Because philosophy demands honesty, philosophical training can foster skills for self-understanding. Living a life in philosophical honesty, one learns how to see the beliefs that one is operating within. It helps to give a genealogy of our modes of thought, to pick apart and examine our patterns of behavior, and ultimately to construct our lives in a way that does more justice to who we are. I want to say to the graduating class, I think all of these characterizations apply to you. In doing philosophy, you responded to a natural urge. Look back to one of your first philosophy classes here, and remember that, aha, this is really what it's all about moment. At that moment, you did something brave. And yeah, those were some hard papers. Really, really hard. But we took them on, and we did so with an eager and thoughtful honesty. I want to close by saying a little bit about what philosophy does. In Being in Time, Martin Heidegger says, the ultimate business of philosophy is to preserve the force of the most elemental words in which we express ourselves. What does this mean? Well, a language can capture aspects of experience and its underlying structure, better or worse. One of the jobs of philosophy is to mature our ways of talking about the world and ourselves, and reinvigorate the power to express what life is really like and what we really are. I want to give an example to show what this can be like. What we are fundamentally, Heidegger says, is care. He uses this term to unify various fundamental aspects of human being. Our practical care, or concern for our immediate environment, our care for one another, our care for ourselves, our moods, our projects, our ways of being. At any moment, we already find ourselves caring, and this throws us into the projects for the future. All of our concerns are intertwined in this care. I think Heidegger was right to bring the force back to this word. It makes sense to think of ourselves as fundamentally beings that care. This might explain why acts of genuine love and the radiant works of a committed artist stand out of paradigms of humanity. To be human is to care. And that's exactly what's so great about Berkeley, or philosophy at Berkeley. I could hardly imagine a community that shined with a greater degree of care. Philosophy majors at Berkeley, it seems to me, are some of the most committed, hardworking, subtle, and caring people that there are. Teachers and students alike care about their work and each other in a way that is admirable and rare. Here, people really care to understand, to plunge headlong into those very hard, very human questions. I feel blessed to have been part of this community, and it will honestly be difficult to leave a place so brimming with care, and in that sense, humanity. But that care has given us a vivid picture of philosophy, a natural, brave, and honest love of knowledge. Thanks.